Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we crack open dense topics and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, making you genuinely well-informed. Today, we're plunging into the profound world of Supertraining by Yuri Verkoshansky, a true foundational text in athletic performance.
Yeah, this isn't just another book about lifting weights, is it? It's really a deep dive into the intricate science of how our bodies adapt, how they grow stronger, and how they achieve peak potential. Our mission for you today, really, is to cut through the jargon and show you why truly specialized training isn't just for elite athletes. It's a game changer for anyone curious about maximizing physical capability.
Absolutely. We're going to uncover some surprising, maybe even counterintuitive facts about strength. We'll explore these really sophisticated training methods developed by pioneering coaches and scientists, and ultimately maybe revolutionize how we think about human movement. So, yeah, get ready to have your understanding of physical training completely recalibrated. So, let's kick things off by challenging a fundamental assumption.
hmm
What does strength even mean? Because this book right away tells us it's far more nuanced than just, how much you can lift.
Precisely. Verkoshansky argues that talking about absolute strength without specifying conditions is, largely meaningless. And this is a crucial insight, I think. Strength isn't some fixed number, it's a relative phenomenon.
Mhm.
It shifts dramatically based on factors like joint angle, the speed of movement, even the type of muscle fibers being engaged.
Mm.
The source differentiates between absolute strength, that involuntary, almost reflexive force your muscles could produce, and maximal strength, which is the voluntary force you actually express.
That's a fascinating distinction right off the bat. Really shifts the whole perspective, doesn't it? And what's truly remarkable is how far back this inquiry into strength actually goes. I mean, we're talking 16th century texts.
Yeah, like Sir Thomas Eliot's.
Right. And even John Paw in the 1700s recognizing therapeutic benefits of physical activity.
And this wasn't just abstract thought either. You had pioneers like Archibald MacLaren working with the British Army in the 1860s. He formalized a crude but, effective form of progressive overloading, basically adding more resistance over time. These early experiential foundations were critical. They paved the way for figures like Krajewski, who then pushed for scientific substantiation of training systems, moving us beyond just guesswork.
Okay, so if strength isn't just one thing, what does that mean for someone just trying to get stronger? How does this book guide our approach?
Well, it's transformative because it forces you to ask, strong for what? Super training outlines various specific objectives for strength training. Are you aiming for maximal strength, explosive power, a faster rate of force production, or maybe muscle endurance, or even just building muscle and connective tissue size hypertrophy, as it's called? The book emphasizes that different training approaches from extensive, high volume, low resistance to intensive, high intensity, low volume are required for these distinct objectives. And it's all orchestrated through a system called periodization, which basically cycles through these different phases.
Right, periodization. We'll probably circle back to that. So, with that refined understanding of strength itself, how does Verkoshansky delve into the actual engines of performance, our biological machinery? The source describes muscle action as triphasic, which sounds incredibly complex.
It is, but it's vital. Well, we often think of dynamic movement simply as concentric, where the muscle shortens,
Like lifting a weight up,
exactly, and eccentric, where it lengthens.
lowering it down.
Right. But there's always an essential static or isometric phase involved. This isometric phase is present when you initiate, terminate, and repeat movements. It's not just some academic detail, it's like central to understanding how all muscle movement truly works.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. The stark difference in how muscle and connective tissues adapt to training. This feels like a critical insight for preventing injury.
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. Muscle tissue adapts to increased loading quite quickly, sometimes, within days. But the supporting cast, your connective tissues like tendons, ligaments, even bone, they take weeks or months to strengthen.
Weeks or months, that's a big difference.
It is. And this is a key takeaway. An overemphasis on rapidly strengthening muscles at the expense of these slower adapting connective tissues. That can lead directly to injury and inefficient movement. It also helps explain why anabolic steroids, which rapidly hypertrophy muscle without corresponding tendon strengthening, are so harmful in this context. The structures just can't keep up.
Wow. Okay. All that muscular effort requires fuel, of course. What does super training reveal about the sophisticated energy systems powering these incredible adaptations?
Right. Energy systems. Think of your body's energy like different fuel tanks. For explosive, short bursts, say under 30 seconds, you're primarily running on a high octane, super fast fuel system. It's called the phosphagen system, using ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, and CP, creatine phosphate.
So, like, pure power.
Exactly. It's like lighting a match.
Yeah.
Powerful, but quick to burn out. The book also dispels a common myth, clarifying that muscle fatigue isn't due to lactic acid poisoning. That old idea.
Oh, yeah, you hear that all the time.
Right. But in fact, lactate can even be reconverted into an energy source. It highlights the body's remarkable efficiency. Different activities maximize different energy systems, which, directly dictates very specific training demands.
It really sounds like the nervous system isn't just assisting the muscles, it's the absolute conductor of this entire muscular orchestra.
It is. Fundamentally, the very production of strength is intrinsically linked to how efficiently your nerve fibers send impulses to muscle fibers. And crucially, how many motor units, that's groups of muscle fibers, controlled by a single nerve fire simultaneously. Coordination, essentially. The neural influence is so profound. The source discusses these experiments where a nerve supplying a slow twitch fiber for endurance, right?
Yeah.
It was surgically interchanged with one supplying a fast twitch fiber for power. And the slow twitch fiber began to behave like a fast twitch one.
No way! That's incredible. So our brain is planning the movement before we even feel it start. This raises an important question then. How exactly does the body learn and control these complex, incredibly precise movements?
Well, it's largely through proprioception. That's our inner sense of body position and movement. The sense is so vital. The source states it's second only to pain in causing intense electrical activity in the brain. Think about that. And what's truly remarkable is the finding that areas like the motor cortex, the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, they become active before any movement actually begins. This suggests a pre-programmed control or a feed-forward process is at play.
Feed forward.
Yeah. This is why visualization and autogenic training, techniques famously used by Russian athletes, can be so effective. They're tapping into these internal feed-forward mechanisms.
That's a revelation. It totally transforms how we might think about skill acquisition. So, if the brain is planning all of this beforehand, how does that impact the efficiency of movement, especially high speed or ballistic actions?
Precisely. This pre-programming also explains why something like premature activation of antagonist muscles, that's muscles that oppose the primary movement, can diminish skill and even cause injury. Effective movement, especially something powerful like a throw or a jump, relies on incredibly precise neurological timing, not just raw muscle force.
Okay, this is huge. So, if there's one golden rule that just screams out from super training for any serious athlete or even just a dedicated fitness enthusiast, it's the absolute emphasis on sport-specific strength training.
This is paramount.
Yeah.
The book makes it abundantly clear. Generic exercises or methods, while perhaps useful for general fitness.
Like just going to the gym and doing standard lifts.
Right. They're of extremely limited value for serious athletes. Why? Because all forms of strength training produce significantly different effects on neuromuscular performance. You just can't assume one type of strength will transfer universally to your sport.
So to put it simply, just because you can do a truly heavy bench press, that doesn't automatically mean you'll throw a javelin further or punch harder or jump higher in your specific sport.
It's exactly that. Increases in voluntary strength are largely specific to the precise type of muscle contraction used in training. For instance, training with eccentric movements, like typical lifting, yields very little gain in static isometric strength, holding strength. This principle of dynamic correspondence is central. It demands that you match your training methods and means to the specific motor qualities required by your sport. Everything from the range of motion, the direction of force, the accentuated region of force, to the rate and time of force production. It's highly specific.
Okay, but this implies something that sounds counterintuitive to me and probably to some coaches listening. It means you shouldn't try to literally simulate sports movements with supplementary training activities.
It's a nuanced point, definitely. But yes, essentially. The danger is that trying to literally copy a sports movement with, say, weighted implements or resistance bands, that might actually alter or interfere with the finely tuned ingrained neuromuscular programs developed for that specific skill in its natural environment. Instead, the goal is to develop the underlying specific types of fitness and motor characteristics required by the sport. This allows the athlete to then perform their actual sport movement more effectively without messing with the skill itself.
That makes sense when you put it that way. Develop the engine, don't try to rebuild the car while it's driving.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, this brings us to how to organize all this complex training. Super training places a huge emphasis on periodization. What does that truly mean for long-term athletic development?
Right, periodization. It's the intelligent organization of training over time, and it's absolutely key for long-term adaptation and, crucially, avoiding plateaus. It's based on cyclically alternating extensive phases and intensive phases to systematically enhance specific fitness components. And this modifies the simple principle of progressive overload, just always adding more weight.
Right, just lift more every week doesn't always work.
Exactly. The book teaches that continuous monotonic increases in load actually lead to stagnation or even injury. Optimal progress requires alternating phases of increased and decreased loading because the actual tissue repair, the adaptation, the growth that happens during recovery, not during the heavy lifting itself.
That's such a key point about recovery, and a concept often discussed in this realm is supercompensation. How does Verkoshansky unpack that?
Yes, supercompensation. The traditional hypothesis suggests the body overadapts to a stressor, reaching a higher functional level as if, anticipating repeated exposure. However, Russian scientists often prefer the term adaptive reconstruction.
Adaptive reconstruction. Why the different term?
Well, it highlights that training-induced changes go far beyond just replenishing energy stores. It includes fundamental structural changes within the body and, crucially, enhanced neuromuscular processing. It's
Mm.
more holistic.
So it's like a complete system upgrade, not just refilling the tank.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Okay. Beyond these overarching principles, super training delves into some very specific, often quite intense methodologies. Can you walk us through a few of the most impactful ones?
Absolutely. Let's touch on a few. First, there's plyometrics, often called the shock method.
Ah, yes, jumping and bounding.
Well, it's more than just jumping. It's about mechanical shock stimulation to force a maximal muscle tension reaction. It's about harnessing elastic energy. It fundamentally relies on an incredibly brief, explosive isometric and eccentric isometric phase, immediately followed by the release of that stored elastic energy. If that transition phase, the time between landing and jumping, is prolonged by more than about 0.15 seconds, it's not really classical plyometrics, according to Verkoshansky.
So it has to be super quick ground contact.
Right. The source uses this vivid visualization. Imagine the surface is red hot, so your contact must be absolutely minimal. And its effective and safe use depends heavily on understanding an athlete's strength deficit. That's the gap between their maximal strength and what they can actually use explosively.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What else?
Second, electrostimulation, or ES. In Russia, they use something called functional electrostimulation, or FES. This is used with able-bodied athletes to basically intensify muscle tension during natural sporting movements.
Using electrical currents during movement.
Yeah, and the benefits are surprising and pretty wide-ranging. Things like enhanced recuperation, improved endurance, pain relief, and even the potential for modification of muscle fiber type, which is pretty wild.
Wow, okay. And a third one.
Third, let's talk about concentrated loading. This method is particularly effective for highly qualified advanced athletes. It involves packing a high volume of a specific type of work, let's say strength training, into a very limited period, like a focused block. The real magic happens after this intense phase, when that specific work volume is reduced. It elicits what's called a long-term delayed training effect, or LDTE. This allows other qualities like speed strength to then peak for competition later on.
So you overload one quality, then back off, and another quality emerges stronger later.
That's the basic idea, yeah. Strategic timing.
So these aren't just random exercises thrown into a program at all. They're highly strategic, almost surgical tools designed for very specific outcomes.
Precisely. The overarching goal is always to create optimal conditions for functional adaptation, and that's often achieved through intelligently contrasting stimuli within mixed workouts. It's complex orchestration.
With all this highly specialized and intense training, how do coaches and athletes actually manage the process day to day? And critically, how do they keep athletes healthy and injury free?
Yeah, management is absolutely key. It's an ongoing dynamic process of continually assessing the athlete's state and adjusting the training accordingly. You can't just stick rigidly to a plan if the athlete isn't responding well. And it goes beyond traditional heart rate monitoring. Russian methods described in the book include psychodiagnostic tests like electrodermal resistance.
Measuring skin conductivity for stress.
Exactly. And quasi-stationary electrical potential of the cerebral cortex. These offer insights into acute physiological and psychological changes, maybe even stuff the athlete isn't consciously aware of. But also, simpler things like rating of perceived effort or RPE are vital, where the athlete subjectively rates how hard they feel they're working. Incorporating their crucial internal experience is key.
Okay, getting that subjective feedback. And on the flip side, what about the crucial aspect of avoiding injury? What does super training highlight that might surprise us?
Well, the source gives a comprehensive list of causes, the usual suspects: inappropriate warm-ups, faulty movement patterns, excessive loads, inadequate rest. But here's a key insight that might seem counterintuitive. Avoiding exercises deemed potentially harmful can sometimes be unwise.
Really? How so?
If those movements occur naturally in the sport, instead of just avoiding them, the idea is that athletes should acquire the involuntary motor skills to cope safely with these higher risk actions. This includes something often neglected in sports like rugby or American football, but totally integral to judo and wrestling.
Which is?
Learning how to fall safely, developing that skill.
That's actually a brilliant point. What's particularly fascinating here, too, is the distinction the book draws about the role of tissue stiffness and damping efficiency in injury prevention.
Yes, this is a critical nuance. Joint stability requires this delicate balance between mobility and stiffness. A joint might have low mechanical stiffness, meaning it's not very rigid like a spring, but if it has poor damping efficiency.
Damping efficiency, so its ability to absorb shock.
Exactly. If it can't absorb and dissipate shock well, it becomes highly susceptible to injury, even if it feels loose or mobile. Understand the difference between that mechanical stiffness, like a spring constant, and common joint stiffness, which usually just means inflexibility, is crucial for both training design and injury prevention.
Right. They sound similar, but mean different things mechanically. Okay, and finally, recovery. We all know it's important, but does super training offer any specific, perhaps counterintuitive insights into when to apply recovery methods for maximal effect?
It absolutely does. The
Yeah.
timing matters significantly. Applying recovery methods, think massage, hydrotherapy, stuff like that, immediately after a workout is best for short-term recovery. Ideal for, say, between a morning and afternoon training session, if you're doing 2-a-days.
Okay, immediate help for the short term.
But for maximizing work capacity for the next day, recovery methods applied 6 to 9 hours after a workout, or maybe the morning after a late night session, are shown to be more effective.
Interesting. So delaying it can be better for next day performance.
For next day readiness, yes, according to this research. It gives the body more time for its natural processes before intervention. And things like massage are useful tools, but like any method, overuse can diminish its benefits. It emphasizes the need for strategic application, not just doing it all the time.
This deep dive has truly shown us that super training isn't about finding shortcuts at all. It's about deeply understanding the body's incredibly complex adaptive processes and orchestrating them with remarkable precision.
It really is. It's a powerful blend of intuition, honed by years of practical experience and rigorous scientific research. The most effective training programs, as the book reveals, are those that manage to orchestrate all these elements together, rather than relying too heavily on anyone in isolation.
And the source material consistently underscores the profound importance of non physical factors, too, doesn't it? Like visualization and motivational techniques. It's a powerful reminder that even the most meticulously planned physical training won't guarantee success unless the mind is fully engaged, enabling the body to truly utilize its full potential.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this kind of work profoundly suggests that human physical capacity, particularly in terms of strength and adaptation, is still very much evolving. We are truly only scratching the surface of what's possible when we apply these deeply understood scientific principles.
So, for you, our listener, thinking about everything we've just unpacked, what stands out as the most surprising insight from today's deep dive into super training? And maybe how might this influence your own approach to fitness, or even just how you view the astounding capabilities of the human body? That's all for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the cutting edge science of athletic performance. We hope you feel much more informed and perhaps a little more inspired to explore your own potential.